The other aspect of this is the medical community. The oath is, first do no harm. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about, mutilating sexual organs. We're talking about removing breasts. We're talking about chemical castration. We're talking about all these hormones, and that's doing harm, right? So that's irreversible harm. So how the medical community can get behind that and people can lobby for that, it's hard for me to.
And welcome everybody to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, and today I am joined by Judge John Reynolds, former judge out of Lexington, now practicing attorney in Jessamine County area. Of course, you still practice in Fayette County.
I have an office in Lexington as well.
It has, two offices. Sorry.
Right.
Two offices. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the court cases we've seen coming down regarding some of the transgender treatment stuff, ideology, as well as just kind of talk about some court stuff. Had a lot of Supreme Court rulings too as well to discuss. But before we dive into that, please, everybody, like, comment, subscribe, share this out here. If you're listening on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, and this is a longer video, if it ends up being a longer conversation, it can be as long as you want it to be. But if it ends up being longer, but you want to keep listening, you can always listen to it on Spotify and Apple and all podcasting platforms. You can turn it on while you're driving around. You don't have to worry about keeping that open, Facebook open, or YouTube open. And if you're listening on one of those platforms, please leave a review. It helps out the show out quite a bit. And without further ado, let's dive into it. Judge Reynolds.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So real quick, your background, and I know we've had you on the podcast before, a while back there, but so you were a judge, circuit court judge, right?
Circuit judge. Here
in Fayette County. And then you moved out to, you're a little too, let's say, conservative for Fayette Countyans to handle, right? You like your criminals in jail, not on the streets. And so Fayette County, of course, we know the bastion of liberal thought doesn't like that too much. And so they told you, hey, get out of here, and sent you back to, and now you're practicing, you live in Garrett.
Live in Garrett, have an office in Lexington on Short Street, downtown by the courthouse.
Okay.
Have an office in Nicholasville.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And so what do? You mainly practice criminal. You do some criminal law, right?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do criminal law. You do. So if I ever get in trouble, right? A little bit.
You couldn't get in trouble.
I'm in trouble constantly. Let's be very clear. I'm in trouble constantly. It's funny. The other day, they need an attorney for something random, and I realized how many attorneys I know. Because if you're involved in politics at all, I feel like you start to meet a lot of attorneys. So there you go. But diving into it, though, so we've got some rulings recently. Well, let's rewind. So we've had these bills out of these state courts regarding under 18 gender transitioning. So those are things like the hormones, the puberty blockers, the surgeries, and as such. Do you want to reveal your personal bias on this as we go in, or do you want to weigh in on any of those bills or that issue itself?
Well, I'll start by saying I've read Senate Bill 150 in Kentucky, and I fully support it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is generally something you support. You see the wisdom of not letting an 8-year-old change their gender.
I do.
Okay, good, because that would have been a long debate early on for us to have. Be like, why do you think that way? So you do agree with that. So we don't have to worry about that. What do you think is the state's interest? First, do you think the state has a right to kind of be making this, or what is the argument that the state has an interest in regulating this type of behavior?
Well, the argument is that the state has the power to protect, the police power to protect its individuals. And we're talking about protecting children from harm, right? The advocates that are challenging the bill and challenged the bill in Tennessee in the recent Sixth Circuit case, which I'm sure we'll talk about, they approach it as an equal protection issue, and we need equal protection for transgender individuals.
So let's talk about that real quick. So equal protection, that is their argument. That's their constitutional argument. equal protection. That confuses me a little bit because while a transgender, so I also can't take puberty block, or not me, but my son, who's 11, also can't take puberty blockers. The difference is he just doesn't want to. So how does that equal protection play out when you have a situation where the law is being evenly applied, but just a group of people don't want to break the law?
So in Tennessee, for instance, the issue was whether or not children should be given these medicines. And if they weren't given them, if they didn't have access to what they consider gender affirming health care, you're violating their constitutional rights. You're violating their rights to health care. Other children receive medicine and they should be able to receive their treatment and their medicine. And you're going to treat them differently because of their identity.
Do you think the Constitution provides a right to health care?
No.
So their argument is that you allow other children to receive their treatment.
You're treating me differently because I identify as a transgender person,
even though they're not actually being treated differently. There's treatments that other people just don't want.
Right. They're being stopped from hurting themselves, and doctors are being stopped from causing harm.
So that entire argument then would be based upon a belief that this treatment is irrefutably helpful to you.
Yeah, I mean, they approach it as we're a quasi-suspect class. We're not a protected class, but we're a fringe class because we're transgender. So you should treat us as a special class that needs equal protection under the law, and we're not getting it.
So this is an interesting question for me, and in your opinion here, when you're running into these types of classes. So this even, I think, goes into like the homosexuality classes, those kinds of things too, as well. Would the proof have to be that you're quote unquote born this way and it's not just a choice? If the belief is that your choice. So if the belief is let's remove homosexuality for a second. Let's just talk about the transgender. So their argument would have to be they're not choosing to be transgender, that they are born this way. And then that's why they deserve the treatment. Is that how that would work?
Well,
for them to be a fringe minority, right? Because you have to, I can't identify as a minority.
Right. There would have to be some criteria to qualify for a certain class, right? A certain protected group of people. You could say you identify as that, but in the law, so the law says we're going to treat people that were assigned at birth as a certain sex as that sex, and if you have these chromosomes, you're this sex. We're not going to base it on how you feel or what you've decided after your birth.
Right. No, that makes sense. So in order to argue this successfully in court, what would the other side have to show?
That they were a protected class, that the law was not being applied to them equally under the Constitution, and that their rights were being violated because they were transgender.
So if you're presenting that case, right, and then you're trying to also tear down that case, how do you make that case? You got to call up certain experts. You got to put forward evidence that these treatments work and they operate, or?
Well, number one, it deals with a lot of medical issues, obviously, right? So in the Sixth Circuit opinion, there's discussion about medical trials and especially when it comes to puberty blockers and all this stuff. These are off-label uses, right? So if a child decides they don't want to be a girl and they want testosterone, and they
hold on one second, off-label uses.
Yeah.
So they were never actually approved for this.
Right. So we're giving this little girl testosterone, but she doesn't need it. It's not prescribed to, for that reason. So
that's something that it hasn't been fully looked at, because I'm just thinking of, because the whole talk about removing doctors' medical license for prescribing ivermectin was that they were off-label using of it. But in this case, they're prescribing off-label
Right.
hormone
So
blockers.
there's no studies.
Yeah.
There's no peer analysis on what, testosterone does to a 8-year-old little girl. Right.
So if you're presenting that in front of a judge, right? So, let me ask you this. Do you think it is 100% a judge's biases going into these cases? Because what we've seen at the state level, at all these cases, not the appeals courts, but in Tennessee and Kentucky and I think Indiana and, Texas, I think all these states have passed a law like this. We've generally seen 6 or 7 judges at the state level, federal judges, but, individual, judge there within the district make a ruling. And they've always overturned they haven't overturned the law. Correction. They put an injunction on enforcing the law, which is a key difference between overturning the law. Do you want to tell people what that difference is?
Well,
between an injunction and overturning, like what are they arguing in court actually right now?
So they're arguing whether or not they will ultimately succeed. So the Sixth Circuit ruled in the Tennessee case. The Sixth Circuit ruled it's unlikely that the group promoting this or seeking the ban rather is going to ultimately succeed on their argument of equal protection.
Got it. So it's kind of an initial, like my initial feeling is that this law is unconstitutional, or it is.
Right. So therefore, if you're not likely to succeed, and they look at all these different factors, if you're not likely to succeed, we're going to lift your stay.
So how do we have? I guess it. So personal biases of judges certainly have to come into play here, because you have the appeals judges, 2 out of 3 of them, saying no, there's no way this is. We don't think this will succeed. Right. We don't think this law will be overturned. But then you have a lower judge and 1 appeals court judge having heard the same evidence saying they do think, because that's a pretty large burden, right?
Well, when they bring these cases, they forum shop for the right judge to the jurisdiction, and they're hoping that they get a liberal judge. So I'm sure in Tennessee they filed that strategically. So
it is. So there is some bias then of the judge that's probably leading to a lot of this.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay. So, because I guess it's confusing to me, because you say, look, there's not a whole lot of real compelling evidence on giving a 7-year-old girl testosterone, right? But in order for an equal protection case to succeed, you would have to show there's strong evidence that has a positive outcome, right?
Yes, you would have to have some evidence that they are a protected class and that they are being treated mainly on the basis of their identity or their criteria, whatever makes up that class. But the Tennessee court, the Sixth Circuit said, look, legislatures have the right to regulate for the safety, benefit, and welfare, the police powers of their people. And if they believe that, mutilating or, removing tissue or reassigning sex organs and giving these chemicals, if they believe that that's a danger to their children, to the welfare of the people, they have a right to do that.
Real quick, let's explain for people how the federal court system does work, so they understand what the Sixth Circuit District of Appeal, so a bill like this is being challenged on constitutionality. So it goes in front of a federal judge within a state, or
so in Tennessee, a group, a doctor and a couple of individuals that have standing that, this applies to me. I'm transgender and I want to do this. And a couple of healthcare people filed a lawsuit in Tennessee in federal district court challenging the state law for its constitutionality.
Gotcha. And then that goes in front of
and then when they filed that suit, they found a federal district judge that said, yeah, we're going to stop this because I think this does violate.
How many district judges are there per state?
Well, that varies.
But so they go in front of that judge makes a ruling, and then you make it to then appeals. And
so that goes to the regional appellate circuit, which is for Tennessee and Kentucky is Sixth Circuit.
And then what happens after the appeals court?
Well, it could go to the Supreme Court.
And then it goes to the Supreme Court right after the appeals court.
Yeah, that'd be the next step.
That'd be the next step. Okay. So this affects Kentucky because Senate Bill 150 was argued in front of a federal judge. It was argued, though, in front of a federal judge, and now that is affected because we would appeal it up to the Sixth Circuit Court. And you've read Senate Bill 150, you've read the decision out of the appellate court. Is it pretty much the same case?
Very similar. I mean, I don't see how the Sixth Circuit could do anything different with it than what they've already done.
There's no other edge to it that you're seeing right offhand.
No, I mean, it's the same stuff. School. It's about, how we're going to handle this in schools, how we're going to, handle the bathrooms, how we're going to handle pronouns. And then it has the part about, medical treatment. I
think that's key too. So Senate Bill 150, the only part being challenged, because there's parts in it, there's several parts in Senate Bill 150 about, dealing with schools, dealing with the pronouns issues in schools, parental rights within schools, as well. But then there's another chunk to deal with transitioning children under the age of 18. And that's the part that's being challenged as far as that goes. Do you think, what do you think the chances are with this current Supreme Court? They will strike down these laws?
I don't see it.
You don't?
No.
So if you had to argue against these, or you were a judge overhearing it, what would be your argument? So let's say you're arguing against them, right? Or I'm saying against, you're arguing for the bills, to keep the bills in place. Would be your argument as far as the state having purview over this?
Well, this is clearly in the, this is clearly something that the legislature, it's their purview. This is their area, right? So legislatures decide laws that protect the public. These are the police powers of the state. It's the ability to regulate for the safety, welfare, and protection of its citizens. There's a group of people that want to sexually, permanently reassign the sex of children, and with the understanding that, or with the argument that the child knows what's best for it, and the child can make this decision under the age of 18, which in itself is ridiculous, because the law says that you are disabled. If you're a minor, you suffer from a disability. You're a minor. You could not make decisions like an adult can. So, a 15-year-old can't go buy a car. A 15-year-old can't contract for anything, right? They're under a disability due to their age. So
is that actually it's within the law that they view it as like a disability?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I never knew that. Yeah. I never knew legally they're no, a child is mentally, I guess, disabled from being able to be held fully accountable.
Absolutely. They can't make decisions, day-to-day routine decisions that adults can, but yet they can make a decision about this. And the argument from the other side is, well, gosh, we have a lot of teen suicides because people can't live if they don't, change their sexual identity. And we're actually saving lives by letting them do this, which is ridiculous. I mean, we can't let children make decisions to permanently.
But what about the argument that the parent is making the decision? That the parent is okay signing off on it. So, while it's right, everything you said about those decisions, but there are some instances where we will say, okay, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to get your driver's license, for example, if your parents sign off on it, or you're allowed to do that. And so one of the arguments I hear a lot of times is, well, this is a parental rights situation. These parents have the right to treat these kids in this way.
It affects them for their life. They can't make those type of medical decisions, permanent decisions about their minor children. It's just, it's completely inappropriate. And what you have to remember is, the other aspect of this is the medical community. The oath is, first do no harm. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about, mutilating sexual organs. We're talking about removing breasts. We're talking about chemical castration. We're talking about all these hormones, and that's doing harm, right? So that's irreversible harm. So how the medical community can get behind that and people can lobby for that, it's hard for me to understand.
Well, they were okay with abortion for a long time, right? Well,
Right.
But that's I guess a different conversation. Did anything stick out to you about the appellate court decision, whether it's the dissenting opinion or the opinion that agreed? Anything stick out to you?
No, I thought it was, well written, and it took on every argument squarely. I didn't have any problem with it, and I think it's a good decision, and I'm proud of the Sixth Circuit for doing it.
I've been interested to see what the ramifications of the affirmative action ruling is, because you have states like ours and other states too that will offer programs. For an example, the state right now has a program to help only, they fund it for millions of dollars a year, to help only minority individuals. So I believe this counts as skin pigment as well as gender. So I guess if you're LGBTQ or a racial minority or female, I believe that the term they used was, what term did they use? Underrepresented in the business community or something. But we spend millions of dollars a year to help those individuals start a business. Mm-hmm. Do you think the ruling on affirmative action will affect those types of programs too as well, or do you think they're separate issues? Just in your opinion.
Well, they're not separate issues. Of course, the ruling only applies to, education.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But could you use it to make an argument, that decision to make an argument on? For those of you listening to audio only, he's nodding his head.
Certainly.
Yes.
I think you could. I mean, it's certainly the same circumstance, just applied in a different area,
different kind of setting as far as it goes. It's interesting to see some of these things coming down. Another argument that we heard a lot during this and I'd be curious to know what your opinion is as a judge, and I know we've talked about this actually, is this wanting to make it illegal for minors to attend drag shows. Which is, obviously a hot issue. I'm confused on why we had to pass a law about this at all.
Right.
I'm confused on why I can't just, when are we going to have a sheriff arrest? We see examples of this happening around Kentucky all the time. I mean, Mount Sterling had a drag show with kids at it, right? I mean, that's not exactly a bastion of liberal thought in that community. No. So when are we, I just wonder that, what is stopping these sheriffs from saying, we're going to go out there and we're going to stand, we're going to watch this go on. And the minute we see an inappropriate action, a sexual action in front of a minor, we're going to arrest them for exposing themselves to minors or inappropriate sexual action in front of a minor. I don't know what the exact crime or laws would be. You probably know more about that because you're a criminal attorney, but do they have a case now, or do we actually need to pass a law about it? Do they just not want that attention? They don't want the political pressure. What's going on that a guy in the 4th of July parade can wear a thong in front of my 11-year-old child?
That happened?
Well, actually, he was 8 at the time. This was 2-3 years ago in Lexington at the 4th of July parade. Yeah. It's seared in my memory. Me and my wife talk about it all the time. Have you ever seen any of the first Sacha Baron Cohen movie with the where he made that movie where he's supposedly this Eastern European guy, Borat, dictator. not dictator, Borat 1.
Okay.
And in the movie, and I think it's actually on the cover of the movie, he wears this green singlet thing that just is down here and then it comes up and it goes around his shoulders. That's what the guy was wearing, and he was on rollerblades, and he was a part of the Pride float during the 4th of July parade, right?
Yeah.
And so, obviously, I didn't show up wanting to expose my child to that. I didn't know what I'd be running into.
Yeah.
But why is that legal?
Well, it's legal in the sense that if he wasn't naked, right?
Right.
Close to being naked, but not naked. I guess he's not, there's no law against that. I don't know what the answer is.
So you think we do actually need to make a law to make it a little more clearer
Well,
about what exposing yourself to a minor is?
I mean, yeah.
In order to start to see some more.
Well, the thing about the drag shows are they're so sexualized. You know, it's not like they dress up like women and they do like a beauty contest where they just stand up there and they talk about their platform and they do things. It's all sexualized.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's the gyrating and all the gross stuff that they do. That's the problem.
I mean, even their names are.
Yeah, right.
Sexually
exactly.
Exactly. Of course.
So, you know, maybe there needs to be a law against sexualized performance, if you will.
Right.
Because they're not naked, but they're at the same time they're doing stuff that's. You know,
well, obviously, I can't show my child porn. Right.
Right. You can't take your child to a strip joint.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's illegal. I wonder what the rules are regulating things like burlesque shows right now. Because if I'm not inaccurate, I believe burlesque shows are 18 and up, generally speaking. So I wonder what the ruling are. What is the obsession with doing this in front of kids in the first place?
Indoctrination.
I mean, it doesn't even make money. Like the idea of, oh, we're going to go to a drag show, it makes money, would be that, you know, the place can sell alcohol, right? But if you're generally selling, like, especially a whole lot of alcohol, you can't have kids there anyways. Or you don't want kids there. I mean, I don't want to be drinking next to some, like, 5-year-old kid I don't know.
Right.
With a cross-dressing man in front of me. That doesn't sound like a good time. That what you're into? No, I'm just kidding. But so crafting a law to deal with that, definitely some difficulties, right?
Yeah, that would be a difficult one to draft.
Yeah, because you're trying to legally define.
Well, you know, the sexualized performance in school, I mean, that, you know, that's completely inappropriate, but that happens.
Right.
You know, some people who believe in school choice and send their kids to private school would hope, well, that would never happen in my school. But, you know, if there's no law against it, I guess it could. Like your example of Mount Sterling.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I mean, you've got places, you know, you've got Somerset will have their breweries and stuff have family-friendly drag shows all the time. And you just wonder, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, obviously, the minute that's passed. What is fascinating is going into this, I don't know, were you following the story about where Swain had passed away? The state house rep, Swain, had passed away, and there was a special election.
Right.
And they were looking at, there was this transgender person, male to female, transgender person that was looking at running. I don't know if you remember those stories about it.
No.
Anyways, that individual, though, transgender, was testifying at this drag show event there. And apparently this person, I don't know how to describe them, so I'm just say person, they perform in a rock band. Like a normal performance, but they're a transgender person, right? So I guess they're technically cross-dressing, but it's not, the thing itself is not sexual. I think it's a little bit sexual. You get your kicks from cross-dressing, but the performance itself would look fine with anybody playing, you know, the guitar or whatever. And the concern was the bill they were considering last session, it would outlaw this person from being able to perform normally in their band because they're a transgender person. And they'd be technically cross-dressing. But what I think is important in the law, though, was that it was in front of people under 18, which becomes a question, too. But I guess so crafting that about cross-dressing in front of children or sexualized, because how do you legally define a sexualized performance?
It'd be hard.
It's like, I feel like it's really difficult.
Yeah, it would be difficult. You know, I think it's probably been done. There's probably examples of that out there, but it's a fine line, and it would be hard to certainly define with any specificity. But you know, you kind of know it when you see it, right?
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I have you here. Crime, especially in communities. You live in Jessamine, Garrett County.
Garrett County.
But you've been seeing it out in those areas too.
No.
In Jessamine, right?
Not in Jessamine, yes.
Yeah. Not Garrett.
Yeah.
Garrett, I think
There's not much going on in Garrett.
there's not much going on. What are they going to do? Steal a cow? I guess wrestling, right? I mean, there's not. I mean, obviously, there's drug use, crime, and things like that.
Sure.
But there's not. I mean, I guess those people shoot too. I mean, they shoot first. They ask questions later.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you're like, I live out there. I know, right?
Yeah.
But I guess in Jessamine County, dealing with those issues going on, what have you seen to be the contributing factor? I mean, you're a criminal defense attorney, right?
So in Fayette, there's the gun violence is the big issue. Drugs, the fentanyl is a problem all over the country, central Kentucky, Lexington, Jessamine, all the surrounding counties. Fayette has a terrible gun violence problem. A lot of youths shooting each other, a lot of just random acts of violence involving guns, which is just, I don't know how you solve it, but.
Do you ban the guns?
No.
No. Won't solve it?
No, that's not going to solve it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know,
Yeah.
that you don't think that would be
Yeah.
an issue kind of to solve there. What do you I mean, do you think, so when we look at drug issues, right? So you hear advocates saying, legalize all drugs. That should be okay to do. We shouldn't, whatever.
No.
You've got people saying, look, drugs, we need to be treating the addicts, taking care of the addicts, things like that. And then there's people that say, look, it's illegal, it's a crime. They need to serve out their punishment. You've advocates, of course, and we've talked about this on drug court and those kinds of issues. I mean, what do you think from a legal aspect we're doing wrong on drugs? And what can we do right? As a former judge, as a current attorney, what is the legal system doing wrong on drugs, in your opinion?
So they're not being prosecuted as they should. When they are prosecuted, the penalties are so light. There's bail is minimal, if at all. Probation rates are incredibly high. So people continue to abuse the system, abuse themselves. They end up in the system and they don't learn their lesson. They learn that I can get out of this and, I'm not going to go away for a long period of time. And until people start receiving significant sentences where they really have a long time out to think about how they're going to want to live their lives and what they've done wrong, they're going to be rewarded. They're going to be let back out. They're going to go back to doing what they were doing.
You'd hear people say, as you say that, they say, well, you send them to this is just what people say. I'm not saying it. This is just what people say. That, okay, you send them to jail. They get this record. They have no chance at an honest life because they have this record. They've been in jail where they've just learned how to be better criminals. And so that's why we need rehabilitation and not prison time. What is your reaction to that?
Well, number one, it's not true. For years you couldn't get a felony expunged in Kentucky forever. And then we passed the expungement law and they've just increased it by scope ever since it's been passed. So you can expunge every drug related felony. I think, I don't know of a drug related felony that you can't expunge. So you can expunge those charges. The people that say that when they say, well, I don't want a felony on my record. What do you do? Well, I work for a roofer. Well, is that going to affect your ability to, keep roofing? No. There's work out there for anybody that wants to work. I don't care what your record is.
Yeah. So you're not buying that.
I'm not buying it.
You're not buying that line of things. What about they just learn how to become criminals?
I think they learn that, there's no consequences. I'll share this story with you. I had a client, we were doing some expungements for him, and he had a bunch of expungements, and he cleaned up his life, on the right track, 40 something years old. And we're going back and looking at all the times he'd been in and out of jail, in and out of jail, in and out of jail. And I said, well, we got to go back to this judge and get an expungement. He says, oh yeah, man, I really liked him. He always granted me probation. I said, where do you think you would have been now, 20 years later, if the first time you would have cooled your heels a little bit, maybe a year or two? He said, I probably wouldn't have continued using drugs for the next 20 years. I probably would have learned my lesson, but I kept getting probation. And I thought that was very telling, that he had that realization that, I had it too easy. It's a learned, it's learned. And that, hey, okay, it's not going to be that bad, and I'm going to keep doing this. And if I get away with it most of the time, and if I don't get away with it, it's not the end of the world. I don't have to be responsible for my actions. I'm just going to keep cheating the system and ultimately cheating yourself.
Did you, have you heard about that Cabinet for Health and Family Services issue going on up in Louisville?
Don't think so.
Where they had these kids for weeks on end in the offices, housing them there. And they're only getting showers like every 4 days at a YMCA, and they're sleeping on cots and air mattresses. Did you hear about that at all? No. As
a temporary placement, the cabinet put them in that situation?
Yeah. And they said the cabinet admitted to over 3 weeks is the longest one's been there. 3 weeks. Just sleeping in their offices.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? You certainly see, obviously, in the work you do, you deal with some of these things as far as that goes. How upset would one of your clients be if their kids got wrongfully taken away and they were sleeping in an office for several weeks?
This is the agency that's supposed to protect children,
right?
Not neglect children.
Well, I said this earlier in the week. I'm like, you better be taking them out of some pretty awful situations.
Yeah. If
having them sleep on a air mattress in an office for weeks on end is an improvement.
Wow.
In the situation there. What do you think about the Bashir administration?
I won't be voting for him.
As an attorney, as a former judge, as an attorney, is there anything he's done that just has really struck you as?
No, he's played it so safe. He just been kind of quiet, shows up when there's a storm, hands out checks.
Right.
He's really hasn't rocked the boat or had any real major issues come up, and that's
outside of COVID.
Yeah, but I mean, that's so far in the past now, and are people going to remember that?
Well, and the question is too, is that when you look at those things, as far as rocking the boat, those kinds, he's able to take the credit for, because realistically, the legislature is able to come in and do a lot of things. I mean, they put out their last budget without even waiting for him to put out a budget. Like he's just so like a second thought almost.
Yeah. And he just shows up and takes credit for, I saw it on the news the other day. He was showing up, taking credit for some big federal grant, like he did that, and people watch that and go, oh yeah, he's doing good.
Well, do you think that race will be real close?
I hope not.
You think it'll be a squeaker?
No, I think Cameron will win easy.
Did you hear about Attorney General's race? Pamela Stevenson doesn't have her law license in Kentucky.
I did hear about that. That's incredible.
Is that a little jaw dropping?
I hear she's working on it though, and that she hopes to have it by the end of the year.
Did you hear what her excuse was?
No.
Was that in Indiana, they don't require you to take this ethics test. And so she just never took it. And so she just operated in Indiana. Mm. But even though she lives in Louisville, I don't know how hard of an ethics test this was. I mean, I guess maybe if you're her, it's really hard to take an ethics test. But, think about this. You live in Louisville. You had to cross the bridge. You literally can't do anything in the city you live in.
Couldn't find a better candidate for Attorney General?
I guess not. I mean, it's such a foregone conclusion. I mean, Russell Coleman's what? He's got $1 million that he's sitting on probably at this point. I don't know how much he's got. He had, I think, like 400,000. While you could still sign up to run against him.
Yeah.
In the primary there. But it's shocking to have somebody who's literally never practiced law in Kentucky. Like, I'm just blown away by that.
Well, you would think that would be a qualification to even file to run for office.
What's weird is there's like this loophole, right? You have to have lived in Kentucky for, I think 4 years or 2 years or something. And you have to have practiced law for 8. There's nothing in the requirements that says
Where?
Or that you have to be licensed. But if you get elected, you wouldn't be able to do it. You couldn't. There'd be, the minute you brought one case, wouldn't there be lawsuits? Like, hey, they're not legally allowed to even operate in Kentucky.
I mean, it's laughable that a candidate running for attorney general for Kentucky would not be a licensed attorney in Kentucky.
That's just and why wouldn't you resolve that like a year ago?
Yeah, I'm sure she thought about running prior to.
I mean, surely they didn't come to her at the last minute and be like, hey, you want to run for this? Yeah. Not only that, but she's a legislator. And so, I mean, it's just like she's been a legislator for 4 years. 4 years. So we know she's lived in Kentucky at least 4 years. But it's like you spend 3-4 months out of your year in Frankfurt anyways. And you literally can't. It just blows my mind.
Which tells you she's really a non-practicing attorney, right? I mean, how much legal work is this lady doing?
Can't be a lot. She was like, I believe she's in the military for she was in the military for 25 years as an attorney. Like a JAG attorney or something. So anyways, I don't know. It's fascinating to me to see that kind of go on. As far as that goes.
Well, I look at that as a concession. They've just conceded that seat to the Republicans, which is fine.
Well, I'm sure too. It's not like I'm sure the party isn't coming in to offer a lot of support either in those positions. I mean, but if you're Andy Bashir kind of went out and recruited her, as I understand it, and he did that for a lot of positions because he was kind of looking for good surrogates. So that way, if he's not there, he's got somebody there to say, go vote for Andy Bashir, whatever. Did nobody check to make sure she had a law license in Kentucky? Because you would think, I mean, I guess maybe if you're Andy Bashir, you don't really, when's the last time he really did a lot of law practicing? Well,
he was so busy suing Bevin. I mean, you would think he would pick somebody in case he lost that they'd be suing Cameron every week.
Well, I don't know. It's quite honestly, it is that was pretty shocking to me to understand, to read about too as well. I had to go double check and be like, how is this even allowed?
Yeah.
With the requirements we have. What's the name of your law practice?
John E. Reynolds Law Offices.
Johnny?
John E. as in Edward.
Oh, John E. I was like, John, are you going by Johnny in the courtroom?
I don't have a card on me. Yeah.
Be like, old Johnny Law coming down.
There's another John Reynolds that practices law in Kentucky.
Oh, really?
His middle name isn't Edward.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it's John E. Law.
John E. Reynolds.
John E. Reynolds Law.
Law offices.
Because
there's two.
Is there more than you who works there as an attorney?
No.
So why do you have 2 offices?
Because I do so much in Lexington.
You just need stuff. You got to keep stuff. Do you have 2 secretaries?
No, 1. But you got to have a place to meet with people.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Something closer by.
Yeah. So actually, most of what I do is still in Lexington, probably, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
More than 50%. So yeah, I've had an office on Short Street for a number of years, and it's a great location. So.
And you do criminal law?
Criminal, personal injury, medical malpractice.
Okay. So you do the money makers and then also the community service kind of side of things, criminal law, right?
Well, I wouldn't call it community service.
How many times? So you're sitting across. So let's say I'm a client, okay?
Yeah.
And I come in, and let's say I don't know, I stole a car, right? Okay. And I come in, and I'm like, guilty as sin, okay?
You don't need me.
You're like, I'm just coming in and I'm like, I did it. No doubt. I did it.
Yeah.
What are you doing for me? Are you just trying to get me the best plea deal you can?
Well, if you want somebody to hold your hand while you plead guilty, yeah, then you would negotiate.
But But otherwise, but if I'm like, I'm guilty, but I want you to get me off.
Well, it's the state's burden to prove you guilty.
I'm just wondering how it all works.
So what I would explain.
Do you ever turn down cases? You're like, I don't want to represent you. You're so guilty.
I turn down cases all the time. Yeah.
Is it because you're like, you're so guilty? I can't.
Well, who wants to take a loser, right?
Right. I get it.
You
I get
want
it.
to win. So
you're like, look, I'll help you draft up your I'm really, really sorry letter. Yeah. And that's it. I don't want this on my record of wins and losses.
But to answer your question, Andrew, what I would explain to them is the government has to prove you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in order to convict you. And if they can, then you should probably plead guilty.
Save yourself the trouble, huh? Yeah. Save yourself. Anybody you've had, okay, you don't got to tell me the names and stuff. You can't. You're not allowed to. But anybody you've had that convinced you they were innocent, and then you find out later on, like a bad movie, that you've gotten them off and they're super, super guilty.
Well, most people take the position that they're innocent, Andrew. I don't.
What percentage of people come in and say, I'm innocent, and you're like, you're not innocent. There's no way you didn't do this.
I think 99% of people that are seeking a criminal defense lawyer would walk in taking the position that I need your help because I'm innocent. Right? Okay. So they're not.
So, of course, 99% are coming in saying they're innocent.
Yeah.
Out of that grouping, you think half of them are actually like really guilty and they've convinced themselves they're innocent?
It's up to the state to prove that. I mean,
do you think they just lie to themselves a lot?
Of course.
Do you find yourself being more of a counselor sometimes?
Always.
You're like, they have you on camera. That's not me. I swear, Johnny. That's not me on that camera.
Constantly.
You've actually had those conversations before?
Of course.
You're like, that is clearly you on that camera. And they're like, no, that's not me. I just thought that was in bad movies. I'm sorry. I find that funny. I never thought that like people actually look at footage of themselves clearly and say, no.
Well, it's really, you can't tell that's me. I think that's probably more.
That's probably more. Okay. They're like, they prove that's me. I gotcha. Do you ever, so you see the state, they're coming in, they're presenting a case, right? And you don't have to answer. If any of the questions are too probing, just, let me just say it. And so, your guy's super guilty. He comes in and the state has really just messed something up. And you can get him off.
It's your job.
It's your job. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that ever difficult for you?
No.
It doesn't play with your mind. See, because that's what one thing would worry me about being an attorney. Like, like getting somebody who's like super guilty off on a technicality. I don't know if that'd bother me or not,
Well, when you say technicality, you mean the law?
I guess so. I guess that's a better way to put it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You call it technicality. I call it the law. There's a big difference between the two.
I just want people to follow the law. That includes the police.
Okay.
And the citizens. But the court applies the rules of evidence.
Right.
The rules of criminal procedure. And if they're done appropriately, sometimes the prosecution loses and sometimes the defense loses.
Interesting.
But I'm for law and order and rules of evidence.
So you want to get back on the bench one day, right?
Probably.
Okay. What kind of law do you want to oversee? What kind of? Because you're a circuit court before. Yeah.
So as a circuit court judge, we oversaw criminal felony prosecutions, anything from a year in prison up to, I had a capital murder trial. So the more serious crimes. And then also as a circuit court judge, you deal with civil litigation, anything over $5,000 in controversy, any land disputes within the county, et cetera.
So you do criminal and civil, but you're not dealing with family?
No, Kentucky has separate, well, not all jurisdictions, but Fayette County and Jessamine and Gary County have separate circuit divisions, and they just do family court.
Family. You're not doing tickets or anything like that?
No, that's district.
That's district. Okay. I'm just curious how the, how. Yeah. So anything from a year on up.
Anything felony is circuit. District is misdemeanors, traffic violations, small claims, civil disputes under $5,000, probate.
What is it? What is that case? It comes around every Father's Day.
The Louisiana case?
Yeah, where the guy.
Oh, I remember that case well.
Yeah, where he. What happened? You remember the case well.
Oh, yeah.
What happened in the case?
So I can tell you some of the backstory about that case because a friend of mine lived in Baton Rouge, and her father worked for the district attorney in Baton Rouge, and the guy was on the phone with somebody, a prosecutor that he knew, and he was telling them what he was going to do, and they're like, don't do it. And when he walked by in the airport.
So he was on the phone with the prosecutor?
That's the story I was told growing up. Yep.
When he turned to do it?
It was a friend of his, yeah.
So he was already turning himself in.
Yep.
And like, I'm about to do this.
Yep.
So for those of you who don't know, why don't you explain the case we're talking about?
So there was a guy in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that was coaching karate, and he basically abducted one of his students and took the child, I think, out to California, and was molesting the child. And they brought him back from California, and they flew into Baton Rouge, which was a tiny airport at the time. And there's a news video of the guy was getting off the plane, walking through the airport in handcuffs with the police escort. And the father of the child was on a payphone. The story I was told, he was talking to a friend of his who was actually a prosecutor. And when he walked by, he turned and killed the guy, shot a guy right on video.
Because that seems like a case that'd be ripe for, I know you hate hearing this, jury nullification, you know, where the jury's like, yeah, he's guilty, but we don't want to punish him for it.
Yeah.
Right? I know judges don't like hearing that word.
That's not a thing.
You don't, that's not a thing?
It's not a spoken thing. No.
It's not a spoken thing. No. You're like not allowed to bring it up, right?
No, of course not. No, it's not. They have to.
Is it a real thing though?
No, well, it shouldn't be. Jurors have to follow the jury instructions. It's not a,
it shouldn't be.
It's not an option. They can.
Yeah,
they can just ignore it and say, this is what we're going to do.
So they can technically do it, but they're not allowed to be told about it.
Right.
That's interesting, isn't it?
I've never seen that happen, but yeah.
I'm sure it would in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a hung jury.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know to just, I guess nullify it or what have you. Well, so law offices, John E. Reynolds, law.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're in trouble with the law and you're innocent, you should see John.
Yeah.
If you're guilty and you're looking for somebody to hold your hand and help you plea, you should see John. If you're just guilty and you just want a good attorney, you should see you too, or
sure.
Okay, he takes all. And then if you're hurt, medical malpractice.
Yes.
What else? Is that it? You do family at all?
No.
States? Nothing like that. Will, can I go to you to write my will?
I'll do your will.
You'll do my will?
Yeah.
Just mine though, right?
Yeah.
Nobody listening. Slide in there. Be like, it all goes to John Reynolds.
Yeah. We'll do an occasional will.
I do occasional will. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is there a number people can call your office at?
Lexington is 859-212-3111. 859.
Get out your pencils.
212-3111.
So next time you get arrested and you don't say anything, just say you want your attorney.
Never say anything.
And just slide them that number, right?
You say, I want my attorney present before I'm going to answer any
Before
questions.
I say anything.
Yes.
So even if you're innocent, don't say anything.
Absolutely. Especially if you're innocent.
Especially if you're innocent. Don't say anything. I'll tell you a little story. And I know we're slightly off track, but I think I was like 16. Okay, 17. This happened here in Lexington. And I had a little bat my dad had given me, like one of those little like
souvenir bats.
Yeah. And so I was like 16, 17. I was over in Beaumont neighborhood and I was in a car with three of my friends and we were waiting on a fourth friend. Had to like finish something before we could pick him up. And we were just messing around out in the car, just being kids. We had the little bat, right? Whatever. And I think at one point somebody was riding like on the hood of a car, or roof of a car, or something. We were just being kids, dumb kids. Police pull us over. Okay. Cause there's a disturbance, right? At this point, we weren't doing anything wrong, but they pulled us over and, they pulled us all out of the cars and they're talking to us and they say, we've been having reports of people out here, smashing pumpkins, kicking leaves, smashing mailboxes, ringing doorbells. We weren't doing that. Let me be very clear.
Yeah.
We were not doing that. That's somebody else. And the cop goes, and you all match the description. And I go, what, 3 white guys in a tan car? Like, what's the description?
Yeah.
And he gets real mad. He goes, you all are out here doing this and tell me I'm wrong. And my 2 friends were silent.
Yeah.
And I'm just over there and I'm like, you're wrong? I'm like, I don't know what the right answer. I know what the right answer is, but it seems like you'll be upset if I give it to you. And so, and we never got in any trouble, though they did. I think they called my dad or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, Dad, I swear I'm innocent. He's like, he didn't believe me either. But anyways, there you go. That's I don't know, little story. So never talk to the cops.
Don't talk to them.
And without your attorney there,
nothing good's going to come of it.
No, just tell them. Is it true? You may know this. You should, I'd hope. So you get pulled over. Do you have to take the breathalyzer?
No.
You don't get in trouble for not taking it?
Yes, you get in trouble
for not taking it.
But you don't have to.
Okay. So you don't have to take it.
So in Kentucky, there's a law. It's implied consent. It says that if you operate a vehicle on the roads of Kentucky, whether you know it or not, you've already consented to take an intoxilizer test.
Not that I drive drunk, and nobody ever should. It's wrong, but continue.
So the law says when you got your license and you were okay to drive on the roads in Kentucky, you've already consented to take this intoxilizer. You can refuse it, and then your Frankfurt DOT, Department of Transportation, will suspend your license for 6 months for a refusal. But you don't have to take it. Now, you don't have to take a blood test. That's the new development in the law under the McCarthy case.
So you don't have to take the blood test, though?
No. If they ask you to take a blood test, you say no. Only way they can get you to take it is if you consent.
Okay, so you say no if they ask to take you should never drive drunk. Let's be clear. We're not telling you to break the law.
Correct.
But what you're saying is that blood tests you don't have to do.
No longer.
What is the punishment for driving drunk first time? Is it 6 months suspension?
So the laws have changed. Believe it or not, the laws have gotten softer in Kentucky on DUIs. Why?
Is MAD not, or is MAD now more? Did like all the MAD moms move over to Moms Demand Action on gun control? Did they give up on
I think
drunk drivers?
MAD is not what it used to be 20 years ago.
I think they joined Moms Demand Action. Yeah. I think all the moms got tired of dealing with the drunk driving. They went over. So they've softened it. And here's how. So what they did was they want to encourage people to have an IID. It's a device that you blow in to start your ignition. Yeah. Wasn't there a sheriff in Jessamine County that had one of those?
Sheriff Corman had one in his
police cruiser.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead.
People have asked me that before. They said, "Is it true that your sheriff has an IID in his truck?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." It's crazy.
It's crazy. The county had it. So he had an interlock on his actual
it was like a white Tahoe. Yeah, it was
on his county vehicle. Huh?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's my understanding. I never saw it personally, but that's what I was told.
Okay. So
the new law, it's been out a couple of years, but so now in Kentucky, if you get a DUI first offense and you're found guilty or plead guilty, it is a 6-month suspension of your driver's license. However, if you apply for and install an IID in your vehicle, you can drive, and the suspension period is reduced to 4 months. So if you time it correctly, you will never lose the ability to drive with the DUI.
Okay, so let's rewind to this whole breathalyzer thing for a second. Okay, so the punishment for refusing the breathalyzer is the same as the first time offense for DUI.
Correct.
Does refusing the breathalyzer also stack the same way the DUI does?
No. You mean enhanceable when you say stack?
Yeah.
So so interesting. The refusal on the DUI on the breathalyzer is not a court; it's an administrative refusal from Frankfurt. So it's not the court that actually suspends your license. It's Frankfurt that suspends your license.
So there's no like first offense, second offense, third offense, right?
No.
So I'm not saying you're advising people to drive drunk.
No.
But if you're driving drunk and you get pulled over,
yeah,
and you know, you would be better off refusing the breathalyzer.
Not necessarily. That's a very fact sensitive issue.
Okay.
You know, how much have you had to drink? When did you have to drink? You know.
Well, yeah, because then
I mean,
then you're trying to and obviously the safest thing is to not do that. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying, like you know, you're over the limit. Like you're like, yeah, I just had 5 shots before I got into the car because I'm a horrible person.
Yeah.
And I want to kill everybody.
And this is not funny, but the standard answer is a couple of beers when you've been pulled over. It's always a couple.
Yeah.
It's never 3. It's never 1. It's always, I've had a couple.
Is that what you should tell them?
No, that's what people tell the police.
Oh, okay.
Routinely.
So they come up, they say, have you been drinking this evening?
I had a couple beers.
What should you say? Nothing?
Well,
be like, I want my attorney present before I answer that
Andrew,
question.
You should not drive after you've consumed any alcohol, please.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
You don't have to answer their questions.
Huh. It's a good way, though, to get a breathalyzer.
Well, sometimes they just ask that hoping that you'll say yes. They don't know. They're just fishing. They're looking.
They're just asking questions.
They're just asking questions. What do you got anything in your car? You know, they do that all the time, right?
And then if you don't answer, because, you know, I guess this is what I want to do with you one of these times, right? I see all these dumb videos online. Okay. I'm sorry. We were wrapping up a little bit ago, but now we're down a rabbit hole. Okay. And I see all these dumb videos online. All right. Where people, like, a cop comes up and they just barely roll down their window and the officer's like, okay, license, registration, everything else. And they're like, what did I get pulled over for? And the police officer's like, give me your license and registration. I don't have to tell you. In the state, and I know it's state by state, in the state of Kentucky, is this a forced ID state where if a police officer asks you for your ID, you have to provide it?
Yes, you should.
Okay. You have to, though. It's like legally required.
They have the right to.
I would generally advise people to do that because, like, why be a jerk? You know, like
they have the right to come up to you and say, "Show me your ID."
Okay.
Yeah.
So in Kentucky, they do not have to tell you what they pulled you over for.
No.
In order to ask for your license and registration.
No.
Okay. I want it because I know it's state by state, but you know, you always see these videos, you know.
Yeah. People want to argue with them.
And then you got the sovereign citizen people, right?
Yeah. They're out there. Yeah.
I'm not driving. I'm traveling.
I've heard it all.
I mean, legally, you can buy a car and drive on your property.
Yes.
You can do that without a license.
You could.
But you're still subjected to ad valorem taxes on that vehicle, aren't you?
Property tax. Yeah. Well, if you want to register it, sure.
But if you don't want to register it.
No, you could keep it on your property and never register it.
So if you just get like a mud truck.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay taxes on that.
No.
You just keep that on your property unless you want to take it on the road.
Yeah.
And then you do.
Better.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So anyways, back to so breathalyzer. I'm not saying you're saying this, but if you're super, super guilty, take your 6-month suspension.
4 months with the IID.
Well, but you could refuse the breathalyzer.
Okay, you've refused. Okay.
Yeah. So if you're refusing, because in my mind, right? Once again, Don't drive drunk. I don't know how many times we got to say this. We're not saying it's a good thing to do. It's a bad thing to do.
But do you understand? They don't need a breathalyzer result to prove you guilty, right?
So that's another question. Can they make you do a field sobriety test?
No.
Because you can plead that's like a Fifth Amendment issue, right?
Well, you know, one of the questions they ask you is they'll say, is there any medical reason why you couldn't submit to these tests that I'm going to ask you to do? Yeah, I got a bum knee. I got a balance, got an ear issue. I got an imbalance, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that don't or can't take them. I had a guy who's an amputee, and the officer was going to make him take a field sobriety test. And he's like, I got a fake leg. You know, walk and turn, one-legged stand.
Yeah. It's like, which leg?
Yeah, ridiculous.
I don't know. I think the fake leg would help him out, though.
Yeah.
That's rock steady. It doesn't matter how many I've had to drink. I can stand on that thing.
I went along when I was on the bench. I did a ride along with Lex. I did a couple of ride alongs with Lex Police Department, and they stopped this poor lady. She was a school teacher, a DUI on New Circle or Man of War, and he started her off to do the walk and turn. Well, she had these giant heels on. And I said, officer, have her take her shoes off. He was going to have her do the field sobriety test in like these 3-inch heels. And I'm like, you can't do that.
Do you think, so I've always had this idea, right? That somebody from maybe, I don't even know how legal this is, but what the rigmarole would be, but somebody from like the public defender's office should be on dispatch with the police officers, where the police officers, if they have a question, like, is this exactly legal, not legal? What's the actual legal, whatever?
So they don't have that for both sides of the equation. You know, when the officers say, well, you don't have to talk to us. If you want an attorney, we'll get you one. They won't get you one. There's nobody that they call to get. They just stop questioning you. And then, when they charge you, you get one, but you don't get one prior to being charged. So that's an absolute fiction. And then the cops have to rely on their sergeant. You know, they'll call into their sergeant if they got a legal issue. When I was with them, they would be like, what do you think about this? And I'd just tell them in real time.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is great. But, you know, they'll have to call a prosecutor. You know, if they have somebody's cell phone, I guess, or a relationship, they could call a prosecutor and say, hey, what do you think about this? Because
that's one thing that I've always thought would help the public, I guess, relations aspect or whatever you'd want to call it. Because I always thought what caused all this animosity towards police, who are doing a very hard and difficult job, is that you have a lot of people that, you know, maybe they got pulled over when they were younger for speeding, let's say, and they were going 8 over, and they shouldn't have. But they get pulled over and they get a speeding ticket. They know that officer can not give them the speed. We all know that. We all know an officer has that discretion.
Yes.
And if at that point of your life, you are financially struggling or things like that, could be a real life-ending situation for you. Because you've got this $200 ticket you got to pay. Okay. You can't afford to pay it, or you're going to get your license. I'm not saying life-ending, but it could be a really difficult thing, right? And of course, we're not introspective of being like, I shouldn't have been speeding, because that's not how human brains work. Probably should, but that's not how human brains work. So I think that starts to breed like this natural animosity, because they're like, that guy could have let me off. So instead of taking the blame for speeding, like, oh, it's his fault for enforcing the laws he's supposed to.
Right, because that's the problem. Nobody wants to take responsibility for their own actions.
Right.
So
right.
They blame the cop.
Well, and then they start, because I don't know. Do you ever watch Cops?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of times you'll see them start to like argue with them. And I always thought, like, if there's like a public defender, like on dispatch or a call or something, that the cops could call and then like hand the phone, like it's not a recorded call, and hand it to them. And they could ask them like, hey, the officer's telling me to do this, this, and this, and I don't think that's legal. And then this public defender can be like, no, you need to comply. That's completely legal.
Yeah, there's no mechanism for that. The only thing that's even close to that is going back to your DUI subject. Kentucky law says that if they bring you in to submit to the intoxilizer, that you have 10 minutes in which to reach an attorney to decide and ask whether or not you should take the test. So the law does give you that opportunity to call an attorney. But, basically they're like, there's the phone book. And in every video, the client's like, well, I don't know who to call. How am I going to get a hold of somebody?
So, okay. Let's go back to this DUI thing. I just thought of this question here. This is a whole different subject. I brought you in to talk about initially. Now we're talking about DUIs. But that's the way it goes sometimes. Okay, so you get pulled over. You refuse the breathalyzer. You refuse to do the field sobriety test.
Okay.
The police officer can arrest you anyways for suspicion of being under the influence, right?
Yep.
What proof, beyond a reasonable doubt, could they furnish in court to prove it? Other than perhaps body camera, you slurring your words, things like that. But beyond a reasonable doubt, how would you prove that they were driving under the influence? Because they never submitted to the field sobriety test. They never took the breathalyzer.
There could be plenty of evidence.
They'll go to like the bars, figure out where you were.
No. So, I mean, number one, in Kentucky, you can be prosecuted as a per se violation, 0.08 or more. Or if they don't even have a test, they can just say, straight prosecution under 189 for DUI. Imagine before they had these fancy intoxilizers. How did they charge people with DUI? Well, they were manifestly under the influence. They smelled like alcohol. They were unsteady on their feet. Their eyes were bloodshot. They slurred their words. I observed them driving. They swerved. They wrecked. They ran a red light.
Sure.
There's all those physical observations.
So the officer just has to testify to the physical observation side of things.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And now with body cameras.
Body cameras are great. And KSP's getting them.
Are they?
Finally.
KSP hasn't had them?
They have not had. They've fought it forever. They're finally getting them. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I guess that's enough time today. We won't get off on another subject. John, Judge Reynolds, thank you for coming in. Yeah. I appreciate your time. And everybody, if you're in trouble and you need a friend, call John E. Reynolds Law. Your number one choice for criminal accidents, hit and runs, not hit and runs, accidents, injuries, workplace accidents. Do you handle those too?
Sure.
Personal injury. Pretty much all the settlement cases and then also criminal cases, right?
There you go.
There you go.
And don't drink and drive.
And of course, it's always free too. You represent people for free on bodily injury, right?
Well, it's
or
contingency.
Yeah, of course. Like it's free up. Like all these lawyers say, it's free, but really, it's
if we win, it's not free.
It's not free.
I'm
they get a good
third.
percentage.
Yeah.
You just don't got to give it to them up front.
Right.
Right. Which means you better have a good case.
Right.
Don't come to John with your horrible cases.
No.
He doesn't want them. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for joining us. Once again, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all those good things. Have a great day.